Good morning, everybody. This is Rick Marr. We are about 10 minutes away from getting started. So we will get started just about 11 o'clock, maybe a minute or two after. We're going to monitor people entering. We have a lot of people joining. So thank you for being here, and we'll be back to you in a few moments. Good morning, everyone. This is Rick Marr. We're about 5 minutes away from starting. So thank you for being here early, and we'll be back to you in a few minutes. Folks, we're about 3 or 4 minutes away from getting started. Thank you for being here early, and we'll be back to you in a few minutes. Good morning, everybody. This is Rick Marr, CEO of Turning Point Human Capital Management. I want to thank you for joining today. I know that we all woke up and started working today in a brave new world and a new reality for all of us. So I know it's difficult, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. So a few housekeeping items. This is being recorded, so we will have a copy of this recording out to you in the next 24 to 36 hours. So you'll have access to this. If you would like to chat, there's a chat function on your screen, so we will answer all questions at the end of the session. Our intention is to go about 25 or so minutes on the presentation and then open it up to the Q&A. And so we will get started. So again, thank you for coming. Really, this presentation we're reacting to the executive order last night, which we'll get into, but really this is for business owners that are trying to keep it all together, right? I mean, there's just, again, just a lot of moving parts that are happening right now. HR departments or HR team members who we hear from many of them are overwhelmed right now. There's just, laws coming out, there's rules changing, all kinds of stuff all day long, employees asking questions. So it's a very challenging time. So it's for those overwhelmed HR department teams. And then really for employees who maybe for the first time are trying to figure out how to work their job, deal with their home lives and technology and all kinds of things that a week or two ago we didn't even think about. So I want to thank you all for being here. So let's get forward here. So I know this topic may be of urgent concern to many of you, right? Whether you have telecommuting somewhat in place already or not at all, this is no longer an exercise. The New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has implemented the New York State on pause executive order. This order went into effect last night, March 22nd at 8 p.m. And pause, New York State on pause is the name of the order. Pause is an acronym and stands for policies, assure, uniform, safety, and everyone. So that is the executive order, and that is what that acronym stands for. Businesses that rely on in-office personnel must decrease their office personnel by 100%. So it started out last week as 50% on Wednesday, went to 75% on Thursday, and then it was decided 100% of in-office personnel of non-essential businesses must be working remotely as of today. Exemptions from the order will include things like shipping, or businesses like shipping, media, warehousing, grocery and food production, pharmacies, healthcare providers, utilities, banks, and related financial institutions. If you would like a list of the specific business categories, you can email us after the presentation and we will get you a list of, under those headings, all the different businesses that are listed. Additionally, if you believe that you are an essential business and are not listed on this list, there's a way to apply for that essential moniker at newyork.gov. So that website is, again, is ny.gov, ny.gov. So what's the good news? We here at Turning Point Human Capital Management have worked almost exclusively remotely for several years now, managing close to 40 different team members, and it has become second nature to us. So I hope to give you some of my knowledge and our team's knowledge and strategies that you can use to kickstart this forward for you in a strategic, tactical, and compliant manner. As a side note, I was interviewed by Newsday last week on this very topic. That article was printed in Newsday on Friday, March 20th. The article was written by Victor Ocasio, that's Victor Ocascio, Victor Ocasio. And the title of that article is How Newbies and Old Hands Make Telecommuting Work. So, we've been talking to a lot of businesses about this, and there's some additional information in that Newsday article. So today, our presentation will go through the details of how to take your company virtual in this new mandated world. We will skip the IT/cyber part of this, as that should be handled by your appropriate department. Now, many companies have said, Rick, I don't have a cyber department. If you do not have a dedicated IT or cyber team, please email me after the presentation and we can make some recommendations to some folks that we've worked with who seem to work really well in that space. We will go through steps, processes, and procedures, as well as compliance, strategy, and tactical issues of, again, I'll use the term brave new world. There will be time, as I mentioned, at the end of this presentation for discussion, for answering of questions. And again, you can use that chat function that you should all have access to should you need that. So about telecommuting. So when this presentation was written on Thursday of last week, we were talking about allowing employees to working from home. Well, now that your employees are mandated from working at home, this is a large undertaking. There are things to consider that you may not even realize. Things like, does everyone have a computer and internet access? As funny as that may sound. Can I link their computers to our computers? How do I monitor them? This could be a scary and overwhelming thought. And even think of this, all the schools are closed. So in many instances, there's 2 and 3 and multiple children home and multiple people in the home, adults working in the home, maybe all sharing 1 or 2 computers, right? So there are things that need to be thought about that we never really thought about in the past. So I think you may be pleasantly surprised, though, with that being said, that a majority of your team may already know how to work from home, right, without much instruction from you. Aside from policies, they have probably worked at home at some point. They understand how to deal with it and may have some great ideas. So it's probably a fantastic idea to connect with your team here and ask their thoughts on how should we, quote unquote, how should we work from home? They may have some insight on things like software and different tactics and strategies that they've used in the past. Employees are facing, as I mentioned, new challenges, such as now many of them may be teachers for their children, right? They're homeschooling their children in many cases. They are sharing personal computers with multiple family members. Those computers are touching other businesses, touching the school's websites, other things like that. This is a byproduct of the world we now live in. However, this is not spring break. Work must get done. Just like in the office, every employee should know the company's goals, the department goals, and the position's goals. So where to start, right? That's kind of the first thing. And unfortunately, we don't have time to think about when to start. That time has passed. It's started. So it's important to consider the circumstances regarding your specific company in order to determine the best possible way to begin implementing and dealing with the mandated realities of telecommuting. As a general rule of thumb, consider this: if an employee can close their office door for 8 hours and still effectively complete their work, that job is probably much easier to adapt for telecommuting. While it's certainly more convenient to have employees working face to face, having cups of coffee at the water cooler, having those natural conversations that happen throughout the day, those communications are going to be, those work communications are going to have to be replaced by other methods, right? So there are the natural, simple ones that we all think about, like email. Now we're talking, phone calls, conference calls. Now we might be asking people to do video chatting that may have never done that before, don't have the computer equipment necessary to make those things happen. There may be additional types of communication methods that you need to consider. So things like, for instance, in our office or for our team, we use a couple of programs. One's called Slack, which is very much like a group me or a way for all of us to communicate much more quickly. It's much more direct. It's a phone app kind of a thing. We use other things like Teamwork. Teamwork is a program where you can put all projects with tasks. You can assign tasks to each other, really build a project plan of what each position needs to do, what each client needs to be worked on, and so on and so forth. So additional things to consider. Telecommuting may feel like a policy that is only beneficial to your employees, right? So, am I really working the same way that I would be in the office? Well, we're going to have to get there. So with correct policies and procedures in place, you can see that this could be beneficial to your company. So the goal is to improve the quality of work for your employees, thus improving the morale, reducing the stress that we're all facing at this point in time. And this could lead to an increase in productivity and create a company people will love working for. This is a core value that we practice every day by our team at Turning Point Human Capital Management. And much of it comes from the remote world. So there are potentially real values if you harness the power of this mandate. Being prepared for telecommuting can effectively alleviate problems caused by, environmental issues, right? So being prepared for telecommuting, that sentence is outdated. You have to be prepared. So, now many of us are being thrown into this fire. There will be a learning curve, and there will be bumps in the road. So patience is required, and teamwork is a necessity. So what types of jobs can be done remotely? Jobs and tasks. Tasks that do not require frequent access to physical paper files, special equipment, or supplies not easily or economically transported to and from the employee's home, right? So the simple example there, the most obvious one, is if I need a machine to do my job and I'm not in an essential business, what can be done? How do we handle this as a business? These are concepts that will have to be tackled. Probably one of the most common ones is we have physical paper files in our office that people need access to. And in many instances, one file might touch several different people in a day. How are we going to deal with that? How do we digitize that? How do we not slow an employee down when that file is required? So review your employees' job descriptions to determine tasks that can be done remotely, and brainstorm ideas to revise the tasks that seemingly cannot get done remotely. There's going to have to be, if those two examples, a piece of equipment or a file that I need, are not at my fingertips and they're essential to my job, we're going to have to come up with ideas. We're going to have to come up with ways. So that creativity and teamwork and patience that I talked about earlier are absolute necessities. The next thing, how does your company track hours worked? Since most of the pay of employees' pay is linked to time worked, think about your company's method of tracking time, right? And to determine if it's appropriate for telecommuting. So, for example, a simple example is when I come in, there's a hand scanner when I walk in, and that's how I punch in for the day, right? Well, that hand scanner is not going to be transported to everyone's office, so other methods may be necessary, right? So having a great time and attendance policy and tracking hours work is very important. So we would call that part of your HR technology suite. So time and attendance, payroll, and all those kinds of things, performance management, they all go into your HR technology suite. If that is a struggle for your business and you need some assistance on how to or where to go, we have some great resources. Give us a shout after this and we can certainly guide you in the right direction. Understand that there are still legal guidelines that are applicable to telecommuting. So the company, there's rules that the company's employees must follow, even when working remotely. Although it may seem scary, we do offer some tools to help you ensure that transition is smoothly. We give them to you free. We'll share with them at the end of the session, things like checklists and agreements, etc. And kind of going back to what to do if this came up, in another conversation. What should we do if those paper files are absolutely essential to multiple people doing their job throughout the day? How do we deal with that? Because no one can be in the office. So, really, there's no great answer, but kind of the advice is maybe one of the owners of the business or the leader of the business could go into the office by themselves and start scanning and sending out information. We might be down to that level of detail. So just something to be thought about. So making the switch to telecommuting can seem like it would take time and maximal effort. And it's going to take maximum effort, and there is no more time, right? So we have to deal with it as it comes. But there are tools and skills that are out there, and the switch does not have to be another stressor that's added to your plate. Whereas at this time, we're all dealing with, looking at the news as much as possible in many cases just to find out. And that's stressful stuff. We have to deal with health and all those things. That's stressful stuff. But making this transition as smooth as possible shouldn't have to be as stressful as those other things. Okay. So processes and policies to implement. Your human resources and information technology, again, if you don't have either of those departments and you need some advice on how to get some help, let us know. Those systems departments are going to be essential in implementing and following procedures for your switch to telecommuting. Some processes to start with are, an equipment policy. Your remote policies will need the equipment necessary to complete their work from home, the employees work from home. This can include things like, a computer, a printer, supplies, paper, ink, a phone. If any of this equipment is not already accessible to the employee, the company should consider supplying it, right? So now we're in this demand phase. So, so we need to deal with that. How are we going to get all these people the equipment? Like I said earlier, they might be sharing their home computer with several family members. If it's deemed appropriate that the company supply this equipment, it must be agreed and understood that is to be used for business purposes only. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to make this person understand that I'm not answering their phone call. So throw me off my game. So this is ensure the company reserves the rights to make determinations regarding equipment, right? So, so that the telecommuter takes the appropriate actions to protect that equipment from damage or theft. If the equipment is already owned by the employee, right? So if they're using their own their own system, it should be agreed and understood that the company accepts no responsibility for those if it gets damaged or needs repairs. Scheduling policy, right? So the employee and the company should discuss and agree on the number of days, hours, work schedule, manner of communication for the telecommuting employees who are not exempt from overtime requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? So you still have to track time for those hourly employees. So how do you do that? How do you gather it? How do you make sure you're tracking it properly so that they can be paid properly and that you're in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act? So again, that goes back to how are you tracking their time and attendance, and doing that in a way that works for your new business in this new world. A telecommuting agreement. After the details have been established of what's going to happen, the HR department should be drafting and outlining a policy, and that policy must be followed by the employee and the company. Written communication is best to avoid any confusion or misunderstandings. So just to go back to talking about the spring break concept, we want to make sure that the work that needs to be done is getting done in the time that it's supposed to be done. So that clear communication and understanding that this is not necessarily a time for childcare or running errands or doing those things. This is about doing what needs to be done at the time that it needs to be done. The next thing. So it may be necessary to implement a new employee performance review system with telecommuting employees, right? So how are we going to manage each other? How are we going to judge each other? How are we going to do all those things, right? How do we make sure we're connected and moving everything forward the way that the business should, whether we're in the office or not? So having some new policies and procedures around employee performance might be things like having weekly task checklists that help the employees stay on track, and that keeps the company at ease, knowing that the work is being done in a timely manner. Just as a side note, we have an employee engagement and performance management tool that we use internally, that is specifically designed for telecommuting and making sure that everyone stays on the right path. So it's a very helpful tool that we use internally as well. The next slide. So, sorry. Implementation. You might benefit from creating and working off of a checklist. Obviously, time is critical. We're in it, right? There is no time to waste. And so things need to be done today. This ensures that all the information that has been discussed and agreed upon is in one place and can easily be referenced. The checklist can be reviewed at the start of the telecommuting transition, which we're in, and can outline tasks such as detailing assignments due, hours of work, time recording reminders, privacy agreements, and anything else that's important to your company and your employees. After policies and procedures have been discussed and agreed, they should be administered to all telecommuting employees. Implementation should begin when telecommuters start working remotely, which is today, and compliance with all policies and procedures should be reviewed and recorded. Again, this is time to think about employee engagement and performance management. Your company may benefit from implementing an end of the day, end of the week reports for the telecommuter, outlining those tasks as we've mentioned that they have accomplished, and this keeps them on track. It helps the company determine if the amount of work being done in a given amount of time is appropriate and accessible. Compliance, right? So compliance has not gone away. In all of the guidance that we're seeing, compliance is not being waived. So things like OSHA. Although OSHA inspections don't generally happen in people's homes, there are situations where this is possible. Companies that are required to keep records must also record occupational injuries, illnesses for telecommuting employees. Family Medical Leave Act. So there's a lot of guidance on now the Family Medical Leave Act. particularly the Family First response to the coronavirus and FMLA Leave Act, which we'll talk about. So employees who are sick or taking care of sick family members may be entitled to leave under the FMLA under those circumstances, and those circumstances are being changed as we speak with new guidance coming out from various government entities. So employees who fall under certain criteria may be eligible, and telecommuting employees could still remain eligible. If telecommuting is not an option for an ill employee or someone mandated to remain remote as part of the New York State pause, so example, someone who's over the age of 70, it is important to know how to comply with FMLA and how to protect your business and those employees. Workers' compensation. Employees that get injured while working remotely may still be eligible for workers' compensation, even though the company has no control over conditions inside an employee's home. Ensuring that an injury recording policy is in place and advising employees to immediately notify a manager about an injury is important to protecting the company and those employees. So not that this is happening in any of your businesses, but think about this. If people are afraid of losing their jobs and potentially having no income, you can imagine that workers' compensation could become something that they turn to or look to turn to. So we want to be cognizant of that. So insurance and general liabilities. The employer and telecommuter should consider other insurance and liability issues before telecommuting begins. That day has passed. It's now here. So you should be talking to your various providers of those types of insurances. So for example, in general liabilities and policies, employers need to determine who would be responsible for theft or damage to equipment, right? So that could be significant. So next steps. So getting started, right? So we should be started already. If we're not started, my mandate to you is to start at, as soon as this call is over. So it may be important to review your employee handbook, job descriptions, in order to make your transition to telecommuting employees as smooth as possible. All policies and procedures must be written and explicitly provided to the employee to achieve the best outcome. Employees should be aware of their requirements while telecommuting and be aware of methods for telecommuting, while other employees, it may be important to understand what they should do should problems arise. It may be beneficial to create a contact list of all the phone numbers, addresses, cell phones, those sorts of things, and even some instances, home phone numbers. And you may want to create some sort of contact list on the departments, who they can contact if they have specific questions, concerns, and issues. So just as a side note, we've built a call center model for companies and their employees to call for guidance. If you'd like to discuss how that works, just give us a shout. But the employees do need some place to go for guidance, particularly as the news reports are coming out. The HR departments are hearing things. Owners of businesses are hearing new laws, rules, what's passed, what's mandated, all that stuff can become overwhelming as we go through this. So again, as I mentioned, those things are great for overwhelmed HR teams and such. So having telecommuting policies and procedures in place can come in handy during all types of situations. So we want to think about this and what is the future? Could it happen again? All right. So there's the beginnings of our contact information. And so we'll go here. So here are the things that I referenced of what you might need. So you might need a telecommuting checklist. Just again, email us and we'll get these things to you. A telecommuting agreement, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That's very important with what's going on. That's a law that has been passed already. HR technology, meaning time and attendance, how you're managing people's time and attendance. Employee engagement and performance management. You might need things like support for your HR team. Right now there's a system overload of information. Everyone is overloaded. HR is on the front line now more than ever. So train your employees. Your employees think about this. They may need new skills and training to make this work. So, think about how you might need some support there. In addition, as most people know, in Congress, in the Senate, hopefully today, and the House of Representatives in the very near future, there is, relief bills being negotiated as we speak. Those bills, we've seen some preliminary glimpses of what is contained in those bills. That is going to, if those bills come out, they're going to create a whole nother wave of questions by employees, plans that need to be, strategies that need to be implemented by business owners, and tactics that need to be supported by HR departments. It's going to be an avalanche. So please know that there are resources out there should you need them. So, So what are the next things that we're doing? So, while you can see here in March 26th, while your college students may be home, people may be transitioning out of the workplace, preparing for job fairs, or just getting better at what their new job might be. Retraining of that workforce, or that workforce that's entering it, may be really important to businesses and families. So we offer over 180 online training programs, things from personal development and business skill training. So if you'd like to get a look at that, just give us a shout. There's, as I mentioned, that new bill that's in Congress right now between the Senate and the Congress. We expect that to be, signed, or at least made public in more detail in the next 24 to 48 hours. So we've assembled a team of legal experts and accountants, and we've already put together a plan in place that we expect that new bill to be, as I said, passed in the next 24 to 48 hours. Our intention with that team, legal and accounting and HR, is to break down that bill and any of its benefits. So our operating assumption is that we will dive into that and provide guidance and host another webinar on this topic either Thursday or Friday. This is fluid, so please give us a little leeway. And we're going to advise that bill when it comes out, if it just stands even reasonably close to what they're talking about. There's going to be benefits for companies. There's going to be benefits for employees. There's going to be benefits for independent contractors. There's going to be a whole host of things, how unemployment is paid. There's a tidal wave of information coming, and the benefits for each of the parties, right? Business owners, employees, et cetera, I think are going to be massive. So we are planning on having an additional webinar and guiding you through that bill in the next couple of days. So I thank you for listening. I am now going to open it up to questions. So you can use that question. There's a Q&A function. So we'll start there. So we have a question. Let's say an employee is working from home, but his or her productivity has seriously dwindled and nothing is getting done. Can the employee be terminated? It seems like a slippery slope at this time. So I think this goes back to kind of what we addressed earlier, is making sure that revisiting companies' employees' job descriptions, what their tasks are, and having agreement of what those tasks might be. But then most importantly, how are you going to measure that, right? How are you going to performance manage that? That's what I think this question is really driving at, right? So, just from a personal standpoint, would termination be the best answer right now? I don't know, right? I think it would have to be reasonably egregious. But if the employee can't get the work done, and there are other ways, there are steps that can be put in place, like policies, procedures, and performance management to help these remote employees. I think on this question that we're going to see for many companies who don't have those kinds of things in place, you should expect productivity hits, because people might be sharing computers. People are now becoming their children's teachers. This is something new. So having proper policies and procedures are the absolute must to make this work properly. And certainly if you need to talk about that further, we can have a conversation there. Next question. We have an employee who is a receptionist. Her job is to greet people and answer phones. That is something that cannot be done at home. Is it illegal for me to have her out of work until the quarantine ends? She chose to leave. She chose to leave. She's not over 70 and does not have pre-existing conditions as far as I know. I simply do not have the work for her at home. So certainly, this could be, without having all the details, it could be an example of a time to use the furlough concept. That for a time being, you could go on furlough. You could be eligible for unemployment benefits. You could, and then when the furlough is over, right? When the furlough is over, you come back to work at your regular pay and benefits and all those other things that, that each, again, depends on each company. So if the work is not there and it's not something that could be done, without having all the details, using the furlough could be a potential answer. Another question. Based on the new laws, can you furlough employees and/or temporarily lay them off? If so, do you have to ensure their job after the layoff? So this is a very good question. So as I mentioned a couple of times to the presentation, we are getting guidance, laws, changes, acts, executive orders, literally coming out, seems by the hour at this point. So the best guidance so far has been to use the furlough option for this question, again, without having all of the information. Typically, this is not legal advice, we're not lawyers, but typically furlough kind of signifies that the person will be coming back to work. Layoff typically signifies that the job is being eliminated for some reason. But with that all said, I think there's another piece of this puzzle that we don't know yet. And that piece is the document that is sitting in the Senate and Congress, in the Congress collectively's building right now. I don't think we know the full details. I don't think we don't know the full details. And we don't know what that final bill is going to include. And we don't know what the final guidance is on that bill. So where it stands today, if you're planning on bringing someone back in the general sense, typically furlough might be the best way to do it. If you're eliminating jobs because your business is closing, because there's no clients, then typically that would be more fall into the layoff side of it. Okay. Next question. If you know, how does the state enforce programs like pause? Is enforcement largely reliant on whistleblowers? Seems like pause would be very difficult to enforce for smaller businesses, no? It's an interesting question. So in the broadest sense, I think that as these acts, laws, executive orders, things are coming about, this is my personal opinion, in many instances, they're reacting to the disease first and the economic side of it or the business side of it second. So I don't know that I don't think that there's stormtroopers at the door ready to check every business. So I have not heard of specific, policies around fines and fees if you break this pause act. However, I think what the intention is, or the understanding is, that as good citizens, all the things that we do collectively are going to help us all collectively stay healthier and then therefore get through this quicker. So I don't know that there is any guidance on how this would be enforced, but I think that the intention is that it should be enforced as kind of a good public health thing. And as we get through this time, I think that compliance issues will come more to the forefront as there's some light between what has happened or is happening, and hopefully when it's in our rearview mirror. Any other questions? Okay, I will wait a moment or two. And I want to thank you. So please, we will be providing another webinar probably towards the end of this week. It's really dependent upon when the government puts their guidance out. Looks like I have 2 more things here. Okay, so again, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you all stay happy, healthy, and safe. And we'll see you shortly. Take care.